Beautiful. All right. So we are recording and we're ready to start. I would like to welcome everyone to our two-day continuous medical education program on systematic reviews. For those who came quite early, you would have heard the introduction given by the rapporteur, Dr. Magdalene Irozuru, who is the Secretary of the Journal of the Medical Women's Association of Nigeria. We have two facilitators, Dr. Emmanuel Akpo from the Delta State University Teaching Hospital, Ohara, and Dr. Yemike Awuno for Delta State University, Abraka. Today is really a momentous day for me, monumental day for me, because systematic reviews is something I learned about 11 years ago. And since then, I have been trying to create awareness, build capacity on this area, but I have never been able to have a structured program like the one we are having today and tomorrow. So I want to thank the Medical Women's Association of Nigeria for making me their national president and giving me this loud voice to have an opportunity to build capacity in systematic reviews. And I also want to thank our facilitators who at very short notice accepted to facilitate. I want to thank all the participants who have joined today, and I want to let you know that it is going to be worth your while. So sit tight and enjoy the continuous medical education program on systematic reviews organized by the Medical Women's Association of Nigeria. Thank you and God bless. I am Dr. Mininim Oseji, the National President of the Medical Women's Association of Nigeria, M1. Dr. Akpo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. We want to appreciate the opportunity given to me to participate in this program and to be able to share a little of the systematic review. I must say that our chairperson has been very instrumental to ensuring that systematic reviews have she's been wanting it to be implemented for over 2 years now, thereabout. And we thank God that today we are meeting to share the opportunity together to see how we can move forward from here. So today we will be talking basically on some aspects of the theory of systematic reviews. Then tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more on the practical aspects of it. And we have opened a Telegram page, which I think will be shared with all of us pretty soon, so that we can share some documents on that page. I think that will be pretty helpful to all of us. And we, the facilitator, will be available to answer any question on that page even after now. We will indulge that everyone that is participating now will put questions on that page if possible, so that we can clarify certain things even after tomorrow. Because I'm sure some persons in the process of practicing or trying to write up a systematic review, we have 1 or 2 questions that they will want to ask. All right, so I'll proceed now with the lecture. So I'll be talking first on on
I think Dr. Agbo's network has pushed him out. Once he comes back, we'll get him back on board. That's one of the challenges we have. Okay, Halima, we have to mute you. Yes. Dr. Yemike, can you hear me? Dr. Uno.
Good evening, ma. I can hear you clearly.
And we will need you to start getting your slide ready.
Okay,
So that
all right.
If he delays.
I don't mind.
Okay, okay, he's back. All right, Doctor.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened.
You went out network, so I'm sending you. I've made you the host now. Continue from where you stopped.
Okay, thank you. All right, can we see my slide, please?
We are seeing your slides. Please go ahead.
Okay, all right. So generally, when we publish articles, the articles start a new independent life, and we don't know who is out there that sees the article. And so we should always bear in mind that whatever article we publish, someone somewhere is looking at it and we want to see if it meets the criteria for being included in systematic review. And so somebody is going to read it critically and appraise it as well. So we should bear that in mind all the time when we publish any form of any article. Now, systematic reviews tend to give us evidence. Some people are entering. Okay, are you taking me out now? Because some people are entering and I'll have to be admitting and all that.
Just try. We are trying to get more co-hosts, so just try for now. We'll sort it out in a few minutes, please.
All right, ma. So evidence, so systematic reviews tend to summarize everything, and it provides us some evidence-based healthcare, evidence-based medicine, evidence-based public health, and the like. So in looking at systematic reviews, when information is generated, knowledge-wise, is generated from evidence based on observations, based on clinical trials, and this move to persons look at those evidences in form of papers and synthesize them in form of systematic reviews. So put them into policy guidelines and then put them into practice, which is what we are referring to as evidence-based healthcare. Today, we are now going to look at evidence synthesis, which is systematic reviews, all right? And so who are those that tend to do systematic reviews? They are independent authors, Cochrane collaboration, groups, individual groups, both within and outside, as we can see here. Now, who are those that tend to use systematic review for decision making? We also use them as individual doctors, researchers, patients, guidelines. They see them all over on the internet, and so we follow suit. All right, so policymakers in particular, they look well into into that. Okay. Now, sorry, I'm combining the work of admitting persons and making the presentation. I'm sorry. So, levels of evidence in research work, sometimes called hierarchy of evidence, are assigned to studies based on the methodology, quality of design that whoever carried out that study puts in place, the validity and applicability of such research work to the environment or to patient care. Those decisions give the grades or the strength of recommendation of such studies. Now, when it comes to level of evidence, we have editorials, expert opinion at the lowest level of evidence. Then followed by case series and case reports, and then case control studies, cohort studies, randomized control trials, and systematic reviews. So systematic reviews are always usually for now on the top of the pyramid. Now, animal studies, so we have level 1 to 5. Animal studies are level 5. We are not involved in animal studies, but I want us to take a critical look at this pyramid very well, so that if we look at case reports and case series, narrative reviews, expert opinion, and editors, there is no design for those ones. Case control studies, retrospective studies, subjects that are used and all that, those ones are non-experimental observations. They are primary studies. We will refer to them. Then cohort studies. Sorry. I'm trying to admit one or two persons. So randomized control trials, meta-analysis, and systematic reviews, when put into policy, then they can go into clinical practice for medical personnel to use. And I am happy, like I said before, that we are looking into this. Now, for every study that is carried out, the Equator reporting guidelines have tried to stratify what should be used, the guidelines that should be used in reporting them. And so these documents will be made available, like I said, on the Telegram page. So as we go through, we'll find out that if we look at this, we will find out that Prisma is what is used in reporting the systematic review. So we will be talking about it concerning randomized control trials and all that later into the discussion. Now, so when it comes to systematic reviews, really, you will have to use some explicit methods to try to identify and then to select the papers that you want to include in your study. And then you will appraise whether those papers meet criteria, set criteria that you would have set from the very beginning before you started your experiment. And then after that, you will sit down and put everything in a form before writing up your systematic review. Now, if the documents that you have looked through, the different papers that you have looked through, if they are statistically similar, then you can analyze them and come up with an opinion which policymakers can look into, and then bring up policies that will chart the course of care. So like I said, a systematic review focuses on a specific question, and explicit pre-planned scientific methods are used to identify, to select, to appraise, and summarize similar but separate studies. Sorry, I'm trying to quickly admit one or two persons who are here. Okay. So, but we need to understand what the difference between systematic review and meta-analysis really is. So we've talked about the fact that systematic review is an unbiased review of the literature. It answers a search and answer the particular focus question that you have. The meta-analysis is the use of a statistical method, okay, to summarize the results of these different studies. Put together, which are similar, use them. So, but there are systematic reviews that we all have seen, and then they tell you systematic review and meta-analysis. Both of them can be used together in some studies. If the papers are similar, as in the statistics are similar, then you can analyze them. But if they are not similar, you will not be able to analyze them. Okay, and let us also note that systematic reviews, some of them are difficult to publish in high impact journal. And so the quality of systematic reviews that we intend to publish really have to be high. And for systematic reviews to have high quality, you have to try as much as possible to eliminate bias, both on the paper and in your selection process. Because by the time you look at the systematic review that you are generating, if there is bias in the papers included, or there is bias in the selection process, or even a meta-analysis process, then that will not fly when it comes to submitting to high impact journals. So I've just put here a table that tends to differentiate between systematic review and normal narrative literature review. And I will also put this in the Telegram page so that we can clearly look at it differently. But just to say that the question that is posed in systematic review is clearly defined. But when it comes to narrative review or normal literature review, the question can be general, okay? It's not really specific. And so when it comes to the components are also different. In normal narrative review, they're also very different. So we need to take note of these differences. Now, what are the reasons for carrying out a systematic review? It may result, like we have put here, from a call where there is a gap in knowledge in a particular area, and you need to prioritize that gap. You want to ensure that that gap is filled. And so a question is raised either from a previous systematic review. And most of the time you find out, if you look at previous systematic reviews, you will usually have a question that is raised, an area that people want to answer a question on. And so that now generates another systematic review. Or a clinician like us, we are practicing and we observe an area and we say, okay, let's look at this area more critically. So we go and review the literature. That is also another generator of systematic review. But the individual one that comes from clinicians like that, may not be funded. So if we are looking for funding, then we should actually be going for the number one type of systematic review, where we will have to look for gaps that are in the system and see how we can review the current evidence and see how we can bring up a course for which policymakers can chart. Now, there are steps involved in systematic review. The first step is to pose a question. And then after that, you will write your protocol. After writing a protocol, you will do a literature search and then do your selection of the literature. And then you will appraise the documents that you have selected and then extract data. And if you will extract your data, and if the data are similar, then you can do an analysis. And there are times that you might have thought from the beginning that you are set out to do a meta-analysis alongside your systematic review. But after review of after data extraction, you will now find out that it is not going to be possible to do a meta-analysis in this case. So you will have to drop the meta-analysis part of it and just proceed to report on the systematic review. And then you can now present your result. Yes, ma'am.
We've enabled co-host. So make me a co-host so I can help organize the room.
Okay.
Admit and mute. Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. I think let me do that, because I've really been struggling to try and see.
I am so sorry. Very sorry.
No.
I'm with two devices, so you have to make the two of them, because one of them is having some challenges. So make me co-host for two of them. You'll see my name.
Okay, the first one is just host that is asking for. It's not asking me to. It didn't bring up the co-host. No. It
has not enabled the co-host feature.
No, ma'am.
Okay, then carry on. Maybe it's taking some time, but we have enabled it. So maybe by the time you are rounding up, we'll be able to sort it out. Thank you. Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience.
No problem. Okay. So, these are the steps that are involved in systematic review. Now, if we go here, we'll find out that the first thing is to put up a question. And then when you have put up a question, you don't want to carry out a systematic review that somebody is already carrying out. Therefore, you will have to make a search to find out whether somebody else is carrying out that systematic review already. So we will look into some of these which I've listed here, the different websites that deal with systematic reviews, and then see if none of them is ongoing, or it has not been done, or it has been done for a long time and we need a further review and update, then you can proceed. Otherwise, then you will have to ask a different question. So the first step is to identify your research question and by formulating a clear and well-defined research question that is appropriate for the scope. And then you define your terminology and find existing reviews on the topic. You may use the Pico system to define the question, which the next presenter will talk about. And then you will now use your database search log Excel spreadsheet to record your search terms under each concept. I will also share this on the Telegram page for us. The second step is to define your inclusion and exclusion criteria and clearly state the criteria that you will use to determine whether or not a study will need to be included in your search from the beginning. So you actually know where you are going from the beginning. So you consider the study population and your intervention type comparison, which is the Pico that we talked about. Some people have added S, which is the Pico's, the S standing for the study design. Then use some database supplied limits to see how you can. So if we are talking of exclusion criteria, you will be using some things to set up your exclusion criteria, things like language, dates of birth, or if a document is more than 10 years old or 5 years old, as the case may be. And then you don't want to look at animals. So all your study will be on humans alone. So you may say that you want to do it only in males or only in females and things like that. So use some criteria as exclusion criteria. Then the third step is to search for the studies that you want to include. So you run your search, like we said, in the databases that we listed earlier. And you need to work with the librarian because they know how to search far more than we do. So you'll get in touch with them. Now there are some papers or some documents that don't come to the public per se. Those that are released by governments don't really necessarily have to be found on Google like we are searching, or on PubMed. So we call them gray literature. And so you have to check for gray literature methodologically and purposefully. In the course of the training, we will look at how to search for gray literature. So you collect all retrieve records from each search into a reference manager. So in the course of this, we are going to look at reference management, one of the reference managers. The one we'll be using will be the Mendeley. So you collect them so that you can go ahead and do your easy referencing. Then you remove duplicates from using your reference manager. Take out your duplicates. So whatever you get, you know that this is the number, because some publications are made in more than one journal. And in the course of search for this information, you will find that one paper has been published in more than one place, and you are going to put all of them in Mendeley, and then you take out the duplicates. Then you will write your report based on the PRISMA guidelines. Okay. I'm sorry. The fourth step is to select the studies for inclusion based on your predefined study criteria. And you will start, first of all, when you make your search, you will start by using the title and then the abstract to eliminate or admit for inclusion. If you get like 1,000 articles and you find out that out of the 1,000, barely looking at the title, only 500 meet your pre-selected question, your question that you set out to answer, then the remaining 500 are discarded. If you look through the abstract and you see that they don't meet your question, then you discard them. So you use your inclusion and exclusion criteria to screen. Okay. So after this stage of looking at the abstract, the title and the abstract, then you can now look at the full papers. Now, the full article may not all be available online. Sometimes you may have to write to the authors and see, but that takes a little time. And that's why systematic reviews, it's not something that you sit down and just say in a month or 2 months, or sometimes even 3 months or 4, you would have finished writing systematic review. So you will need to contact those who primarily wrote that to give you the full article to read through and find out whether it's something you need to include, because systematic reviews, the aim is to ensure that you comb every aspect of information that is available, because you want to make an informed decision that will change policy in healthcare. Okay, now I want to state here that it is highly recommended that 2 independent reviewers screen all studies. There are arguments really whether you need only 2 people or 3 people or 1 person. 1 person cannot do a systematic review. The minimum that is needed is 2. And where the reason that we said is 2 is because there comes a point when 1 person says this article should not be included, the other person said the article must be included. And so there has to be a compromise. Somebody who is now the third person should now come and say, well, he thinks the article should not be included, so you have to exclude it. Or you now say, two of you can sit down and say, okay, these are the reasons why we think it should be included or not included. And so you will agree on the decision to be made concerning that. Now, the fifth step in systematic review writing is to extract data from included studies using a spreadsheet or a systematic review software. For example, the RIAN or the RevMan. These are online software that are purposely made for systematic review writing. We will also share the information on the page with us. Then, so after you begin to extract your data. Initially, you don't just extract all the data at once. You will pilot your data and see whether you will do a trial. After your data, into your data extraction tool, you will do a trial. Maybe after extracting 10 articles or 5 articles or 3 articles, you do a trial run and see if everything comes out to be fine. If things don't come out to be well, you make modifications. If things come out well, then we are good to go. The sixth step in writing systematic review is to evaluate the risk of bias of the articles that you intend to include. Now, in analyzing for risk of bias in those articles, we will be looking at two sources, basic sources of risk of bias. One deals with the paper, the article itself that you are going to use to include, and then the other deals with your screening process of the article. Now, when we come to assessing the risk of bias, which we will talk about much later again, we are just doing an introduction, so we have an overview. When it comes to risk of bias, we will be talking something about meta bias much later. But then tools have been developed to see how these risks can be purely minimized. So the Cochrane risk of bias tool, which we will also share with us on that page, has been developed to assess the potential of biases to see how that can be minimized. The seventh step is to present results and assess the quality of evidence. Clearly, you need to present your findings and include your findings would need to be as detailed as possible. Okay. Your selection criteria and all that will be as detailed as possible from the very beginning. If the documents, like we had said before, if you look at them and the data that you are seeing are close and working together, then you perform a meta-analysis. There is a new term, which they are talking about now, and that is network meta-analysis, which I think we will talk a little bit about later. Okay, and then, but let me just say that, okay, fine, we will talk about it when we talk about introduction to meta-analysis tomorrow. Now, you will need to provide recommendations for practice. Sorry, the quality of evidence that you are generating will be providing recommendation for practice and policy making. So that means that whatever we are going to do when it comes to systematic review has to be, there is no cutting corners. It has to be as it should be to minimize bias, because whatever decision we are bringing forth will be taken fully and wholeheartedly and will be put into practice. So we should bear that in mind as we are writing our systematic reviews. So it's a rigorous, systematic review is a very rigorous exercise, and it takes a team of 9 to 24 months to complete. So if you are going to start a systematic review, the we should be looking at, because it's a very rigorous thing and we all have other jobs to do. So, but we are all encouraged to do that. If we started this year, by this time next year, we should be able to churn out so many papers for the journal of MWAN. Okay. So the quality of systematic reviews vary, actually, based on what we have been saying. Occasionally, the scientific rigor of the collected literature itself is not scrutinized, and that alone creates bias, because the person who is identifying the journal, the persons identifying the journal, you are not scrutinizing how they are analyzed. Yes, you have written it out quite all right, but the rigor itself is not being scrutinized, and the decision is not also being scrutinized. So those are some errors that can create a bias. Okay. And if those errors take place, then the meta-analysis that will be generated will also have a problem. And so we should look into that. Okay, I think I have like a few minutes to go, so I'll be finishing now. So then we need to minimize errors. So like I said, standards have been developed, and those standards are meant to ensure that the objectives are transparent, scientifically valid. Okay. So let's remember that the content of a systematic review should have a clearly stated objective, should be reproducible methodologically, and a systematic search that attempts to identify all studies, irrespective of where they are located, must be put in place. A systematic review should show the assessment of validity of the findings of the studies that are included. Okay. Like the risk of bias of each paper that is to be included or that is included in the study must. Sorry, I don't know who that person is. I think he's disturbing us. Okay. Then systematic presentation and synthesis of the characteristics findings of included studies must be clearly laid out from the very beginning before we start writing a systematic review. So it is essential that each review is approached rigorously from the very beginning and with careful attention to detail, and do a careful planning and documentation of everything that is being done, because 10 years or 15 years or 20 years down the line, somebody else may want to update the review that you have done today. In fact, PRISMA has come up with another current update of the guidelines for reporting systematic review, previous systematic reviews, aside from new systematic reviews. So it's something we also need to check, so that if we are looking at evaluating previous systematic reviews, it is that guideline, PRISMA extended guideline, that we will use, not the one for new reports. So the aim should not be to just collect data and summarize and publish, but whatever data that we are looking at should be reliable and unbiased. So in summary, if we are looking at writing systematic review, whatever the motivation for undertaking a systematic review, the preparation and conduct should be rigorous. The search for resources, databases should be undertaken to check for existing and ongoing reviews and ensure a new review is justified. Otherwise, there is no need to run in that review. So a review team should be established to manage and conduct the review. Every member of the team that is going to review to write up a systematic review should have a particular skill. And such skills should include some expertise in writing systematic reviews and retrieving information from the net, writing relevant clinical topics, the area of focus. Somebody in the team should have an idea about it. Somebody should have an idea about statistics and health economics if possible, and or qualitative research methods where appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akpo, for giving us a succinct introduction to systematic review. In fact, you have taken me down memory lane to see how I got involved in systematic review. And this is more like a revision for me. The beauty of looking at all the evidence, looking at all the publications, even reports in our offices, which constitutes great literature, how they could be utilized, harnessed, synthesized, and inform policy. It's really beautiful to have an opportunity to have this discourse as we are having today. So I'm going to hand over to the rapporteur, Dr. Irozuru Magdalene, our J-MWAN secretary, who is going to give us a Q&A session for the next 5 minutes before we have the next lecture, the next presentation. Dr. Irozuru, Q&A, please.
We're all welcome. I'm sure we listened attentively. I was trying to write down and at the same time take a snapshot of each of the slides as much as possible. I'm sure we have questions. So if you have questions, please raise your digital hands and let's take them one by one. You have questions? Any question?
Please note that there is a message in the chat room saying that you should join the Telegram group so that you can get the materials. So please do endeavor to take time to click and join the Telegram group. We'll be sending that link again and again so that everybody will be aware and you will all get your materials at the end of the day. Thank you. Thank
you. Okay. Any question? You can write your questions out. I've not seen anybody raise hand. No question.
Okay. I'm going to have to make Dr. Yemike the host so that he can give the next presentation, the second presentation, which is going to be on formulating a research question. So Dr. Yemike, let me make you the host so that you can share your slides. While the presentations are going on, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat so that we can take them as we go on.
It's okay, Ma. Thank you. So let me share my slide. Okay. Come. I'm trying to get it out. Please just give me a few seconds. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm coming. Yeah. Let me share now. Okay. Yes, thank you for your patience. Okay. I still have to admit some people. So. All right. So I'm sharing the slide now. Please, I hope we are seeing it clearly. Let me start by appreciating the leadership of the Medical Women Association of Nigeria, the president and members of our team, and thanking Dr. Akpo for the overview. My presentation is going to be focused on formulating a research question. The big picture actually is that ultimately we get teams to come out and do some systematic reviews. But as the earlier speaker said, the building block for the systematic reviews are well done individual or independent studies. So while formulating a research question is focused on systematic review, I'll go a little bit below at other levels of studies we might be carrying out. We formulate good. The learning objectives include to know what research questions are, basic, clinical, and public health research, and to be able to formulate research questions using the Pico approach, and then to highlight its application in systematic reviews. The process of steps used to collect and analyze information to increase our understanding of a topic. At what point in time we have been involved in research, whether as undergraduates, we do research to get and also to improve the policy-making process. So it's a scientific investigation of facts and relationships to establish dependable solutions to problems through systematic. The speaker talked about the need to reduce bias. For us as epidemiologists, bias is simply a systematic deviation from the truth. I like using the example of having to go to a did not come when we were doing the training. And then on the day we went to the field, the clear instructions was, if we're going to take, okay, for children above 5 years, school-age children, if we're going to take their weight and their height, they must all remove their shoes and then they must all remove whatever is on their head, come for the training for their own reason, also enter the field, and coincidentally, they were paired together. And so the classes that they handled, it didn't matter to them whether the children wore their shoes or wore a hat or something on their head. While for those that were properly trained, they took those measurements and took them well. The standard was no shoes, nothing on the head. Now, when the measurements come back, when we are collating results, there will be a challenge. And the challenge will simply be that those people that did not follow our standards of practice or our standard operating procedure will add inches in height to those children that wore their shoes. And also some level of increase in weight because they are wearing all the data that came from those people that did not come from the training will shift what the mean value of weight and height for these children will be, because there's a systematic error. So when we're in research, we collected our data would have also prevented fine. I'm trying to let people in. Now, research in the health science, clinical and population or public health research, and translational research cuts across the above categories, emphasizing a team approach and it is synergistic in nature. What towards One Health, where it's not the doctor alone thinking of the whole protocol. He has to get somebody who is involved in ecology, somebody is involved in microbiology, even somebody that might be involved in sociology to come out with something comprehensive so that we look at the proposal from different aspects and come out with something that is robust. And by the time the project is ended, the papers that will come out with from different perspectives and indeed will enrich knowledge. So translational research, the approach to research could either be quantitative and qualitative. All these things play a role when we get to the point of talking about the research question. Sometimes people play with they don't take it serious with the research question, but if they have supervisors that are particularly observant, the issue of research questions in framing a study objective and then in coming out with what you might call a hypothesis could be very frustrating. So a postgraduate student comes to meet his supervisor and the supervisor says, what is your research question? He goes back and keeps reading. He comes again and he says, what is your research question? And then beyond that, what is the gap? What is the problem you think you are going to add value to in solving? Again, translational research refers to studies of how to translate findings from the ivory tower into the real world. T1, Translation 1 research, is about applying basic science findings from laboratory research in clinical studies of patients. So as the pathologist is planning, he has the input from the clinician so that those findings are feeding into the current practice in the clinic or in the wards. For T2 research, we are applying the findings of these clinical studies to alter health practices in the community. And ultimately, when we synthesize findings with a systematic review, and then if we have a quantitative thing we are measuring and we have a meta-analysis, ultimately it's supposed to improve our practice and improve policy in healthcare. The tools we use in data collection in health research will depend on the study design and the study variables of interest. And these study variables, this is a reminder, as I said, the big picture is systematic review, but the building blocks are well carried out studies. Whether we're talking of a cross-sectional prevalence study, or you're talking of a case control study, or you're talking of a cohort study, or a non-randomized control trial, and or in the randomized control trial. If these things are conducted well, they feed into the resources that will help us produce our systematic review. In fact, the benefit of this kind of session is by the time you are doing your independent study, you have an eye that could actually be picked and used for a systematic review. So your rigor, your scientific rigor should be more. Now, study variables could be quantitative. The simple rule of thumb we use when explaining it is those variables that can be measured, those variables for which we can have a mean and a standard deviation, like weight in kilogram, height in meters, blood pressure in millimeter of mercury. These can be measured. So we term them broadly as quantitative variables. Why for qualitative variables? As a rule of thumb, though it's simplistic, we say they can be counted. Sex, gender, male, female, marital status, single, married, separated, divorced, or blood group, A, B, and O. So we cannot come out with the mean gender or the mean marital status in a group of people, but we can count and say a large proportion of this population are made up of. It's important we know these variables so that we know what we can make out of them. And this is dependent on the research question. Your research question plays a role in the topic for your research. It plays a role in the objective of your research. And if it's quantitative, it even plays a role in the hypothesis that will drive the research. For systematic review, it's key. You have to have a strong research question. Remember, people have done the randomized control trials, they've done the other studies. So it's actually your research question that you'll be able to use to screen what fits my criteria and what doesn't fit. And systematic review is a level of study that has benefited from a very high level of, let me use the word accreditation. Those of us in training institutions know the importance of accreditation of our programs. And we know the stress we go through in making sure things are in place and making sure the management does the needful. But the truth is, the accrediting team has already sent you all that you need for you to pass. Is for you to meet it. So also with systematic reviews, there are so many tools like the Prisma and others that were mentioned by the earlier speaker that spells out what is expected. And in following them, to a large extent, a lot of these bias will be removed and the studies that are of value will be added. So this is dependent on the research question. Now, let me just, this is supposed to be a cascade. First, a topic interests you, your research topic. And then there's also a problem that you are trying to solve. That's where the gap comes in. And then there's the research question that you want to answer. It's simplistic, but with that Pico format, there are elements in it that can make us clearly state from when the question is asked, whether it can be achieved or not. And when it is achieved, what will we see? If it's not achieved, what will we see? These questions boil down into our specific objectives, and particularly for the quantitative variables, it enters into our research hypothesis. The research question is the issue at the root of the study one hopes to conduct. And it doesn't just jump from the sky. It can be arrived at following keen observation, a focused literature search, or guidance from peers or mentors. This is meta-analysis. There's always the zeal to do something new. But the truth is, with the level of knowledge and tools about systematic reviews, it's important that before proceeding too far, find out if we feel. And you can't really research without searching. So it requires focused literature search and guidance from peers or mentors on what the issues are. It forms the basis as I said earlier, for deriving specific. Supervisors get agitated where a candidate or a student or somebody that wants to carry out a research use very interesting words, but cannot be specific on what is supposed to be achieved. If you're or you fail to achieve it. It could be a primary question or a primary with ancillary questions. For systematic review, the question most times is just one. Just one primary question that is key. And Hawley and his colleagues came out with a criteria in what would say is a good research question. They called it the final criteria. Almost like the criteria we use when we're talking of objectives, being smart, being specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Now, Now for the research question, wholly visible. So know the practical limits and scope. As Dr. Akpo said earlier, a systematic review is akin to a labor of love. 9 months to 18 months. Interesting. What is your interest? Because at a point, even as a team, you'll be discouraged. But when it comes out, it's wonderful. And it's cited by so many people. But you need to go into something in your specialty or your interest. That's when it becomes press on. Then is it novel? And that is why it's important that before proceeding too much, you have to also find out what has been said or what has been done in that area. Then the ethical issues, you have to clarify on the benefits and the risk. And then its relevance. Is it relevant? Here you have to discuss with peers, experts, and mentors in the field. For people that are involved with a lot of research writing and have also written some of these systematic reviews or are experts in a particular part of medicine or development, just with a conversation, they are able to pick this is not worth pursuing. And yes, this is the area, just by reason of experience. Even in coming out with the research question, don't do it in isolation. Test it, test it, test it, discuss, and let it be further clarified. Now, let's look at steps in getting a research question, like COVID-19. And then you do some preliminary reading. What has been overflogged and what has been scantily spoken about? Where is the specific niche? You narrow down to your specific niche, what you are particularly interested in. Then you identify a research problem. Where is the gap? Where is the gap? When you have identified your research question. I just put in this to just help as a guide on ways of identifying the research gap, statement of the problem. It's not just about the systematic review, but I said this guide could also help in studies at the lower level in the hierarchy of evidence. A lack of relevant studies on that issue. It could be a geographical gap. We know about it in Southeast Asia, in America, in the United Kingdom, but we don't know much about it in Sub-Saharan Africa. It could be a demographic or population gap. We know some things about COVID in the elderly, in the adult population. How about it in the young men and adolescents? Then it could be as a result of a controversy, lack of knowledge, understanding, or consensus on an issue. One interesting thing in looking at Cochrane reviews from their libraries, there are some conclusions that are clear. This has benefits from the studies. There are some that are not beneficial, and they would say it doesn't provide any benefit in it. And then there are some that the review plays a very powerful middle, tells you a little bit of why it might be beneficial, another little bit of why it cannot be beneficial. And just to say that the consensus has not really been settled on the issue. So that opens up opportunity for further studies. And then it could be as a result of problems in previous studies or issues you identified in an earlier systematic review, which could be conceptual or methodological. So it could have been better handled. The studies, the criteria for that review would have been more stringent or could have been better designed. Now we go straight to the Pico approach in formulating a research question. Pico was born out over this need for evidence-based medicine that is not personal opinion or expert opinion, but we have to have a systematic way of asking the question, going to the databases to find out, and then coming out with a conclusion. So Pico is actually in 4 parts, though there have been additional T. The first one is the patient, if we are doing clinical research, or the population, if we are doing population or public health research, or the particular problem, for want of where to fit it. How would you describe a group of patients similar to your own? That is the P. The next point is the intervention. The next point is the intervention. Is it a drug? Is it a behavior change program? Is it provision of reproductive health commodities? What is the intervention? The third one is the comparison. What is the alternative to what you are providing? And when you are searching, if they don't do this, what is the alternative? And then finally, the outcome. This is what you actually measure. What you actually measure and say, yes, there's progress or there's no progress. This intervention is beneficial or it adds little or nothing to this particular problem. Some authors have included 2 T's. So you see some books, they call Pico TT. The first thing talks about the time period where you want to review. It talks about the time period in which you want to review. And then the type of study is the second T. What type of study are you interested in including in this your review? Do you want it to be randomized control trials? Or because you might not have enough randomized control trials, will you accept non-randomized trials? Will you accept cohort studies? So these are issues that this Pico approach helps to clarify. Because remember, if we have our question well formulated, when we are now searching the databases for relevant studies, which we will learn as this course progresses, it becomes easier, it becomes sharper and better. Let me admit some people. So again, Pico talks about the patient, population or problem. Meaning? The intervention. C is the comparison group, and O is the outcome. So when we see research question, we try to pick out these points in those research questions. Now for a systematic review, what we have said have been general principles that work for
user problem.
Please, could you?
So I posted into Bakaduma Maname posting Bilanga ID number Kasan Saga password Kasanji.
Okay. All right. Now, focusing on the systematic review. The systematic review should be a response to a clearly formulated question and involves the identification of relevant primary research studies that address that question. It's akin to allowing people to come to an event and there's a criteria, maybe dress code, IV. So your research question sets out the criteria without bias of the studies who admit into our review and the studies who keep out. Now, each study found should then be included or excluded according to predetermined selection criteria. So the methodology in a systematic review is studies are to be reviewed. The methodology section is always very heavy. Then we look at the results and how it's discussed. The findings should then be summarized and appropriate conclusion drawn. That's for the systematic review that are relevant and meet our criteria. The ones that meet our criteria are included. The ones that don't meet the criteria are kept out. And then the findings should be summarized and then appropriate conclusion drawn. So it also helps to improve policy. So it should be well done. If not, it will mislead people. This is the hierarchy of, let me admit some more.
Don't worry, I'm taking care of the admitting. Just carry on with the presentation, sir.
And the study types included. It stopped at randomized control trials. And it took us some time to even accept that the systematic reviews and meta-analysis will not take over above. But even with the output, just as the pyramid is, you will see more of the meta-analysis and systematic reviews. Actually, they should guide practice guidelines or public health policies. But it's dependent on well carried out studies at the lower. Now, I'll be rounding up soon, but I want to use some specific examples to talk about these research questions. Simply, should we recommend low fat diet for obesity? This is a question. Should we? And the objective that spun out of that question was to determine the effectiveness of low-fat diets in achieving sustained weight loss in obese or overweight people. So that's an example of a research question that fed into a systematic review. Now, the population of interest are overweight people. The intervention is the low-fat diet. Will it help to achieve sustained weight loss? The comparison group will be the usual diet outside the specific low-fat diet. And then the outcome is actually loss of weight or reduction in weight. They want practice guidance in making that recommendation. And the question is, should we recommend low-fat diet for obesity? And using the Pico, we'll be able to split the different components in it. Using this Pico criteria, we can be able to make our search smarter and better. I'm still admitting. I wish someone could help.
Don't worry about the admitting. I'm admitting myself. I'm a co-host. Doc, are you hearing me? Can you hear me? Dr. Awuno? I said I am admitting, so just leave it. I'm admitting. I've been admitting them, yes. So just concentrate. They will just wait for a while, please.
Okay, all right. It's okay. But it has a way of blocking the screen. Now, should women under the age of 50 be offered routine mammographic screening? That is another question. And so what's our population of interest? Women, but not just women over the age, women under the age of 50. What is our intervention? Routine mammographic screening. What is the comparison? Women under that age of 50 who are not offered that routine mammographic screening. The fact is, once we make it routine, is going to add costs to the health system. So it's not as simple a decision as let's just do it. There has to be a benefit cost of knowing whether we can include it in our health system as something that should always be done. So we now look out for studies targeting our population of women under 50. Intervention is mammography, routine mammography screening. The comparison is women under the age of 50 that are not offered routine mammographic screen. And then the outcome is how many are we able to pick women that have early stages or lumps or early stage of breast cancer. So this is how we refine and define our question, which will also guide our search. Now, from the Cochrane library, I picked this up. And it's as simple as this. How accurate are rapid tests for diagnosing COVID-19? How accurate are rapid tests for diagnosing COVID-19? So these tests are going to be offered predominantly to adults. The adult population will be our primary population. The intervention is the rapid test, which we should get results faster than the classic test that is currently on. And then the control is not using that our rapid test. And then the outcome, how much of this rapid test using screening criteria, how sensitive, how specific is this rapid test? What is the positive predictive value? What is the negative predictive value? All those indices are things we're going to now measure as an outcome and say, yes, this rapid test effectively mirror the standard test for COVID-19 screening or diagnosing COVID-19 as the case may be. So when we have come out with that question, it should be able to fit into that our Pico criteria. I attached the link for the report in the Cochrane library of that particular systematic review. How accurate are rapid tests diagnosing COVID-19? So these are the kind of questions that trigger doing a systematic review. I have a second one. Yeah. There's another one. This example is the effects of antibiotics on toothache caused by inflammation or infection at the root of the tooth in adults. The effects of antibiotics on toothache caused by inflammation or infection at the root of the tooth in adults. So our population of interest, adults who have an infection or inflammation at the root of the tooth. Our intervention is use of antibiotics. The control, that's a management without antibiotics. And the outcome, what are we looking out for? If there's fever, is it resolved? If there's pain, is it resolved faster with those who use antibiotics versus those that don't use antibiotics? And we go all out to find out studies in that area to guide us. I also included the link so we could read that Cochrane report. I round up now by saying, across study designs, formulating good research questions is key. Generally, it guides the study objective, study hypothesis, and even the data analysis plan. It's so important that we come out with good research questions across our epidemiological study design. But it's even more so important in conducting a systematic review, because this is able to guide the studies that will include or exclude. It will also guide what should be reported. So basically, this is what I have to say about the issue of formulating research questions. As I said, it's key, even in our normal study designs, but much more important when we agree or choose to take up that project of the systematic review. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I will take comments and questions as the case may be. Thank you.
Dr. Rosiro?
Yes. I will now have questions. Anybody with questions?
I have a question.
This is very, very, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Awuno, for all
You're
that
welcome.
you have taught
Go
us
ahead, so
about developing the research question. I remember as a resident, somebody asked me as I was preparing for my part 2, how
Yes.
do you come up with a research question? And I reflected on a workshop organized by Professor Konofua under the auspices of Women's Health and Action Research Center, Benin.
Okay.
Where he said, it's not difficult to get a research question. You just look at the problem you face every day. So it appears that if we look critically at the challenges we have, not just in society, just in the health sector, which are myriad. Let's look at the one that is the most topical, brain drain now. We can do a research on it. Look at what studies have been done on brain drain. Even if we've not done studies in Nigeria, they may have done in Ethiopia, they may have done in Cameroon, they may have done in Morocco or in Poland and so on. So that is the beauty of being able to examine the evidence. However, systematic reviews, which I got introduced to in in the year 2010, has not found its pride of place in most sub-Saharan African countries. I want you to explain why. If you can attempt to respond, please, because it bothers me a lot.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ma. I want to actually salute the way you push this initiative, because Dr. Akwas told me how you insisted that the time it takes, and it's a team thing. So if we are able to work with having teams, Ncbi is doing a lot in the issue of health promotion, maternal and child health in the country. People are digging out those research questions, like you have pulled out this issue of the brain drain. Some other people are also trying to synthesize data and evidence to find out, okay, this is something we have identified, but are you sure it? The idea is actually collaboration, and our institutional system, different criteria, has to also allow for more of teamwork, more of collaboration in writing, so that I'm not just doing mine so that I come out quickly with publication. Or we can do it both ways. It's a win-win. You have your time for your few author publications running concurrently, but you are part of a working group or a team that will focus on this systematic review. There are topical issues. What I see is people fear, one, people don't know enough about the systematic reviews, and people also fear the commitment of time it will take and sustaining a team through it. But once the outcomes are cited, once they are relevant, a lot of people will need it. So to just encourage ourselves and have focal groups, leads, to say, okay, we have identified this. We all have our strengths. Some people are good in identifying the issue. Some people are even more methodical in continue to build teams for research. And I'm sure we can. I'm sure we can.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's a hand up. Galaxy A12.
Well, may
Okay.
I also say that
Yourself and ask your question,
if
please.
I want to contribute to that question,
Yes, sir.
I have a
Yes, sir.
may I
question.
also say, if I'm permitted?
On this resonate team,
Okay, okay.
this so how do we go with such
Sorry, I didn't hear clearly.
Our
It broke.
secretary just left. She just
Okay.
left. Dr. Akpo, you were making a contribution. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Okay,
No,
thank you, Ma.
please,
I was also saying that, you know, considering the time it takes, like he tried to say, and, you know, most of the researchers are in academia, and there is time bound for all those, they need some of these papers for promotion and all that. And systematic review is not something you just wake up and do and tell yourself that in 2 months or 3 months you finished. So that is also deterring people, you know, in my opinion, from going into systematic reviews. Because when you have teams, and yes, you have teams, and you say, okay, let's put up systematic reviews. And the criteria for promotion is there. People are like pursuing promotion and all that. They'll prefer to be part of, you know, the individual or group writing that will produce results early enough. And I think that is one reason why systematic reviews are still done in the country. But I think it's something we can overcome when meetings like this are held and groups are formed. Thank you.
Galaxy A12, can you ask your question? Or is it an error? The hand has been up.
Yes, the hands have been up. Galaxy A12. The hand is down now.
Okay. So I before we go on to the next lecture by the next presentation by Dr. Akpo, which is going to be on finding the evidence, I just want to say that even though I have not participated fully in a well-structured systematic review, but I've used the principles of systematic review to do literature search for different articles. So I'm sure we will be doing that in future. So I've actually trained a lot of young people to help me get articles from Google Scholar, and using those principles, the principles of getting your research question, getting your terms, your search terms, because your search terms will come from your research question, and then going out and utilizing it. Then I've also been able to do some kind of synthesis. So over the years, when I was studying about systematic reviews, we're given a presentation by one of our gurus in systematic reviews, and he talked of, he actually, I think his name is Andrew Booth. He actually published a paper on a typology of reviews. So we may not be able to meet up the criteria of systematic reviews, but we can meet up criteria of an overview. We can have literature review. We can have different types of reviews in addition to the systematic reviews. So it's something to encourage us that I will look for that article and share it on the Telegram page, so that even if we don't do the full, well-structured, gold standard systematic review, we should do reviews. We also can do desk reviews. In fact, I've published a desk review based on great literature, you know, and it's when I am not in academics, but my co-author, who happens to be in academics, said when she was being assessed, she got a very high score for that publication. So the most important thing is that it had so much linkage Somebody's device is echoing. Please, if there are two devices in the room, one should be disconnected. It had so much relationship with policy. So after reviewing gray literature reports and other published works and so on, I was able to come out with some findings. And I was shocked when she told me that, do you know that I got this score when I was being assessed? And today she's a professor. So I just believe that I do not know whether this event with over 100 participants, whether it's enough for sensitization, but for all of us who have had some experience with systematic reviews, I think we need to do more to convert others. And then for those who are in policy making, I'm in Ministry of Environment, I've invited a lot of my staff because we have a lot of problems in environment, oil spillage and so on. My commissioner for environment is telling me that we have this issue of what they call third-party interference, where communities will go and destroy the oil pipeline and they come and ask for compensation from the oil companies. And he said it's a behavioral thing. And he wants me to go and find out how to change their behavior. Where do I start from? I have to do a systematic review, or I have to do a desk review at least, or some kind of review. And I can't do all that alone. So I've had to ask my different staff to come and join in this training so that they can go and download environmental articles and get a kind of review of what has been done in what environmental studies have been done on behavior change of the communities where oil is being exploited. So I just want to demonstrate how important it is. Many times we see problems that have lingered for 30 years. Meanwhile, research is going on. Is it possible that the problems are in one direction and the research is in a different direction? That's why the research is not being translated into policy and practice and helping us to solve our problems. So the onus is all of us here today. We have to do something to ensure that we promote it, sensitize people, get ourselves involved in one way or the other. Thank you so much. There is one Ehige that just raised his or her hand. Can you quickly ask your question, or we go to the next presentation by Dr. Akpo? I don't know if Dr. Akpo is still in the room or he's jumped out, because I'm trying to see him to make him the host and share his slide, finding the evidence. That is going to be a beautiful one. You're around there. Okay, so now you've spoken. So yes, I hope I can change. Somehow I'm finding it difficult to change you. Or Dr. Awono, you are the host. Can you convert Dr. Akpo to the host? It will be easier for you to do that. I'm just the co-host. Okay. So Dr. Awono, make Dr. Akpo the host. Click on Dr. Akpo and then you will see make host and he becomes the host. Dr. Awona, are you there? Dr. Awona? Dr. Awona? Dr. Akpo, can you call him? It's like
I'm trying to do it. I'm not getting it yet.
So what you need to do?
Yes, I'm there.
Have you found Dr. Akpo? So make, or you can make me the host. Let me take care of it. Just make me the host, and I'll take care of it. All right. Thank you. There's one of my names. I have two devices. One is co-host. So make me the host. All right.
I've done that. Has it?
Okay, fine. So, okay. So I can now make Dr. Akpo the co-host, I hope. Dr. Akpo, can you speak so that you come up? I'm not seeing you.
Yes, I'm
okay,
here.
Yeah. Yes, I can. I'm making you the host now. All right, so there you go. So please, can you give us the your next presentation on finding the evidence. I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
Okay, can we see my slide?
Yes, we are seeing your slides. We are seeing your slides.
Hello?
Yes.
We are
Okay,
seeing
okay.
them. Thank you.
Okay, so just to, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. So just to say that in finding the evidence for systematic review, it is very, very crucial that as much as possible, if we don't find the evidence that is not only accurate, but not representative of the society, then the results that we are going to get and the opinion we want to convey for policymakers will be wrong, which means if policymakers adopt whatever we have said, then the practice that will eventually be implemented will be wrong. Therefore, it is quite crucial that we do all we can to ensure that we find the evidence from sources that are available to us. And like we had said earlier, it can be painstaking, can be very painstaking and quite rigorous to find the evidence for systematic review, because we are carrying out an experiment. And this experiment is not only online, but we can also check physical journals. The majority of it will be
We've lost you. Can't hear you anymore. We can't hear him anymore. What's happening? Okay, we are back.
I have.
We're not hearing you.
Yes, somebody, so I don't know who muted me. Okay, so I'm sorry about that short disruption. So I was saying that it is quite important that we ensure that we get the evidence from whatever the sources are, and the sources may not only be online, it may be physical journals that we may hand search and include in as part of the evidence. So in identifying research evidence for systematic review, the search for studies must be comprehensive. The extent of the search is determined by the question, the research question that was asked, resources that are available for the team that is making the research. Hello, I hope you can hear me.
Very well. We are hearing you very well. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, beautiful. So thorough searching is best achieved by using a variety of search methods both electronic and manual, like I had just mentioned, and by searching multiple, possibly overlapping sources. And as we go along, we will find out that there are several sites that we may be getting information from. Our president has just mentioned one that she uses quite often, which is the Google Scholar. And we will be looking into several others to see how we can retrieve evidence from those sources, maybe by tomorrow when we do some practical aspects to it. So most of the searching that we've done is most likely to take place at the beginning of the review. And then at the end of the review, some publications would have come out. So we will need to update whatever information that we have gotten. And that is why, whatever we are doing, appropriate documentation following guidelines that have been put in place must be put in place in such a way that they are clearly followed from the very beginning. And because if you don't follow them from the very beginning and document them well, you find out that over time, after 3 months, 6 months, everything will be jumbled up. So we don't want something like that. So we must ensure that we document properly from the very beginning. So using bibliographic software to record and manage references will help in documenting the process. Now, like we had said, we gave him 2 examples, like the RevMan and the RIAN. They are online systems. EPPI is another one. We will talk a little bit about them for systematic reviews that can be used as online software. So we need to streamline document management and make the production of reference lists for reports and journal papers easier. So the search process should be well documented in full, or details provided for where the strategy can be obtained, because after your systematic review, somebody else might want to, like we said, after some years, improve or update the systematic review that we have done. And so a well-documented systematic review, retrieval of information is very essential. The techniques for search term harvesting is something that search terms that we will use for making our search. So beginning from brainstorming search terms by using the following techniques. And that implies that from the very beginning, the team that is involved in systematic reviews must sit down. This is not a one-man thing. So the team must sit down and look at the terms they want to use to make the search, because following the write-up of the term, a protocol will be established. And then, like we had said in earlier lecture, we will need to look at systematic reviews that are currently ongoing or just recently done, so that we don't duplicate things. And then we will now have to write our protocol. And after writing the protocol, we will submit for approval. And then before we now proceed with making the search and finding the evidence. Because there is no need sitting down and accumulating wealth of evidence from the internet or from manual search of journals, only to discover that what you are searching for is already being carried out in another center, or the terms are not correct, haven't developed your research question. So the team will have to brainstorm and get such search terms and explore the gold standard articles supplied by principal investigators or found through preliminary searches. So we'll look at search strategies from published systematic reviews. Previous published systematic reviews is one way for us to get our search terms. Looking at websites like PubMed, looking at sites like Prospero and the like, will give us an idea of terms that others have used, and that will enhance our being able to formulate our search terms. Okay. So we'll scan records, articles, and searches for usable controlled vocabulary and natural language. So if we look at, because every database has search terms that they use to store information. And if we have an idea about the terms that are used, it makes our retrieval of information a lot easier. And so if we just put in anything that we feel like it may not be giving us what we want. So by taking a look at randomized control trials that have been done, by taking a look at systematic reviews, such search terms that have previously been used can be incorporated. So if you use database tools, to find controlled vocabularies, or we use the Oxford Dictionary to look at synonyms or variants, word variants, or we use text mining, tools to find. We will share something about text mining tools in the Telegram page to find medical subject headings, because databases like PubMed, they use mesh terms. And so it would be good for us to have an idea of how to do mesh search. If we use such tools, it will help us with retrieval of information. And then the use of keywords, we will talk a little bit about it. It will also help us. So if we look for relevant or frequently occurring terms, it will be giving us more information than using absurd terms when we are making our searches. So we'll list all terms in an Excel harvesting form. So Excel harvesting form, that means the team that is going to run a systematic review will have an Excel harvesting form, and then brainstorm on the terms that they will use to make the search from the very beginning, having given the research question. The terms that they will use, they will brainstorm and enter it into the Excel harvesting form. Such terms like title, like cancer, you can now search just on the title, or for abstracts if you are making your search. If you are using cancer, the word cancer, and you are searching for it under mesh terms, it may not go, or you may not get what you want. Rather, you'll be using a different term like neoplasm, or malignant is a more broad term. So that if you are making your search on your summon or your window to create your search, it will produce results for you depending on whether you are searching something on the title, or you are searching on a text word, or you are searching all fields. So the terms that we use to search are very, very important if we have to get results. So librarians are quite good and trained for that purpose. So it's important that we liaise and work with librarians who can guide us and help us to design complex search syntax and methods on how to go about searching different databases, some of which some of us may not have ideas about. All right, because we need to comb as much as possible, as long as we are trying to get all the information that we need. So if we are to look for current systematic reviews, searching for existing systematic reviews on a topic related to your own research question can be a good place to start, because such systematic reviews which have been done might have posed a question at the end of their systematic review. So these systematic reviews, of course, may provide a model for approaching your own review of the literature as you walk around trying to further the review system. Okay. So there are a few which I've listed there. Of course, there are much more than this, but there are areas that we can start from. For example, the academic search ultimate. The CNL. CNL is a database for an archive of publications by nurses globally. Public health, ProQuest, I'm sure we are all aware of ProQuest. Web of Science, and then Medline, PubMed, Hinari, Scopus. Well, more recently, the DOAJ, Direct Open Access journals. We can make some search in some of these ones to see if we get information and that. And as it relates to our region in Africa, African Index Medicus, which is WHO originated, giving information on systematic reviews. We can get something from African Journal Online, which houses journals from Africa. So if we are looking at making a search, global search, and we are looking at making searches that relate to Africa, then we can be looking at these two databases. So we talked about grey literature sometime in the other lecture, and we said grey literature is defined as literature that is not formally published in sources such as books or journals. And this can include information such as government reports, conference papers, conference proceedings, even dissertations from graduate dissertations that are not published. Some clinical trials are also not published. Not every clinical trial is published. In fact, research work that is statistically significant tend to be published much more than those that are not significant. And so as we look for information, you will find out, and that really creates some bias. So if we can find information that is not published, but was presented in a conference paper as a conference paper, and is there in a conference proceeding, then we need to make some efforts to contact those who originated the abstract to see if we can get the full paper and look through it. So I put a link here on how we can find grey literature, and we will share this in the Telegram page. I maybe talk about it a little bit more tomorrow. So if we are searching databases, there are some tips that we will need to look at. The key to being a great online searcher is to use common search techniques that one can apply to almost every database. Agreed, some databases have their own specific way of checking. Others don't. Like Google Scholar, those ones just type whatever you want, it will produce results for you. But if you go to databases like PubMed, you may not get what you want if you type anything that you feel like on PubMed. So there are ways to make such searches. So this is important because searching library databases is a bit different from just searching on Google. On Google, you just put anything you want and it produces results. So if we take a look at a database, if we look at a website and we want to find some information, of course you will see a field like this, which is a space that we can always type something on. So we can adopt a search strategy to any database. Some search tools use free text areas, so some use free text areas, which allow you to type something like this open one. Once you open the web page, you see this, and then you can type whatever information you are seeking on it, and then you click search and the information comes forth. But it's not really like that in every one. Other search tools offer a very simple single line box, similar to what we all know in Google. Okay, which is something like this. This is from ProQuest website. It also gets a little bit more complex in other database websites. Most common search tools use text boxes. Some may use drop-down menus to help structure your search. Like this one that we're seeing here, you will see around here that the first box is just the way it is in Google. And then there are other additional terms to refine what you want to search, to bring out something more narrow than just something broad as we get in Google. Okay, so the common methods for searching for an unknown item. If we want to make a search on any of the databases. Sorry, I think 4 people have been waiting on the room for some time. Is it possible to just admit them?
Sorry, I got distracted. I was enjoying the presentation. I've admitted them.
Okay, ma. All right, thank you, ma. I understand. So there are some common methods for searching for an unknown item that if we want to make search generally, that we will be looking at, particularly if we want to get more of what we want rather than getting information that we really don't want presented back at us from the database site. So if we look at keyword searching, yes, you write an article and then you put keywords in the article. So such keywords are usually not as precise when they are used to make searches. And so, but making subject searching tend to be more specific. And so if we are looking to make search on databases, we should be looking really more on, and we want to narrow our search to give us information on what exactly we want. We should be looking more at subject headings. Okay, making a subject search rather than keyword search. And there is something called Boolean words, otherwise called search operators. These are either to make the thing more narrow, if we want information to get back to us, what we are looking for, either to be more specific or less specific. And you use them to join other words. You use them to join other words. Sorry, somebody is distracting us.
I'm
you use them
using
to
them.
join other words. Okay, thank you, ma'am, or letters. So there are other things like nesting, phrase searching, and truncation, and the use of wildcards. The most common truncation that is used is the star. And then the most common wildcard is the question mark. We will talk a little bit about what they mean as we progress. But they help us to make the search and capture either more or less of what we want to achieve, depending on how we use them. So I have just put a table here that differentiates between keywords and search words. And to say that keywords tend to provide natural language words describing the topic. Good to start with, but subjects are not so. So I'm going to also put this up. But like I said, keywords are more flexible to search and they can combine together in many ways, but subjects are not so. So if we are looking to search and get more results that are akin to what we actually want, we should be looking more at using subject headings or subject search methods rather than keywords. So keywords and subject terms can actually be combined, like we said, using the operators, search operators, which are called the Boolean operators. And Boolean operators are basically three. So Boolean operators keep one search more focused when a topic contains multiple search terms. Then the search engine will have to look at what the Boolean operator is that you are using to separate the words so that it can bring out what exactly you are looking for. Because the Boolean operators, if you use them well, they will bring out the information that you really desire, rather than waste so much time and energy and resources just making searches online without getting what we want. So there are three basic Boolean operators. That is and, or, and not. If we add this to our search words, we will be able to get more focused on what we want. So when do we use and when we want to make a search? We will use and in a search to narrow our results and to tell the database that all search terms must be present in the result that we are looking for. That means if we want to search any item, if we include, for example, what I'm putting here, if we include cloning and we want whatever we want to retrieve to contain cloning, to contain human, and to contain ethics, then we will have to separate them. Instead of writing a single line, cloning, humans, ethics, we will have to separate them using the Boolean operator and. It is important for us to note that Google, for example, uses these Boolean words, even though we may type these three things or type a sentence on Google and just get the results that we want. If you look at the results critically from the menu bar, you will find out that Google has added and in between all those letters that you typed. But for us, we should be conscious of when to use and, when to use or, and when to use not. So if we want to tell the database search engine that all the terms that we are looking for, we want them included in our return search, then we use and. So if we look at these three circles, the purple in the middle here is the and that we are talking about in the triangle. If we are looking at cloning, we are looking at ethics and looking at human. If we use and to separate all of them, then it is what is in this middle of the diagram that represents the and that is what it will bring out for us without bringing out the rest of the information. And that is actually what we are looking for. But if we want to expand the scope, and we don't just want this, what is limited to this purple triangle, rather we want what is in the bigger circle of all three, the entire cloning, the entire ethics, and the entire human, then we will be using something different. So these Boolean words are quite critical for us when we are making our searches. So in many, but not all, databases, the and is already implied. So if we know that we are searching Hinari, for example, or we are searching PubMed, we are searching DOJ, as open access journal, we want to search African Journal Online, or we want to search any of the databases, then we should be looking at and, because those things they've already been incorporated. So for example, Google automatically, like I said, automatically puts the and for us. So if we are looking at a search like college student texts, anxiety is translated to college and students and test and anxiety. That's what Google will return for us, okay? And if we want to type it, we should look at it that way. If we don't look at it that way, we might not get what we want in some of the databases. When do we use OR? We will use OR in a search to connect two or more similar concepts or synonyms and broaden. We use it to broaden the results, telling the databases that any of our search terms can be present in what we are looking for, in the results that we are looking for to get. So if we take a look at this, it means that we can, sorry. So if we want, anytime we use OR, for example, cloning or genetics or reproduction, it means that whatever we are getting out, all three circles represent the results that will come out, which means if we want to use the term and, if we look at this, and is more narrow. If we are looking at or is all encompassing. So if and is giving us like 20 papers, or will be giving us like 300 or 500. So let's bear that in mind, because it is a big set, because any of those words is valid. The operator is telling us, the database is being told to produce anything that contains cloning or genetics or reproduction. When do we use not? Because those are the three Boolean words we said, and, or, and not. So we use not to make a search, use it in a search to exclude words from your search. It helps us to narrow the search much more. So it tells the database to ignore concepts that may be implied by the search terms. So for example, we look at cloning, not sheep. That means you should bring only cloning out. You should not, anything that has to do with cloning and sheep, or cloning or sheep, you should not bring anything that has to do with sheep. You should only bring out cloning, which makes the term a little bit more narrow, the search a little bit more narrow. So what's the order for making a search? Databases follow commands. Whatever we put into the database, that is what it will produce for us. But we have to be guided in the sense that there are some of our search terms that we will have only one word, and there are other search terms that have more than one word. If a search term has only one word, it can be left to stand alone. But if it has more than one word, then we will have to put a Boolean word, or we will put it in a semicolon. And if within that semicolon, I will explain it in a little bit in one of the slides. If within that brackets, rather not semicolon, within the bracket, if we have two terms within the bracket, we can decide and say, let's separate them with a Boolean word. Now, we should note the logical order in which words are connected when we are using Boolean words. This is very important, because databases usually recognize and as the primary out of the three, and, or, and not. Search the databases, when search engines usually recognize the and as the primary operator, the or and the not are secondary. So it will first of all connect with the and bring out information on the and before it starts looking for the or and the not. So if you use a combination of and or operators in any search, you need to enclose the words, any word that you want to put or inside, you will enclose them in parentheses. I will give an example of that shortly. So we have talked about when to use not. Not is to exclude anything. We've mentioned this before. So a phrase which looks for a string of words next to each other, exactly as typed. Okay, if we are looking for phrase searching, if we want to use phrase to search, then we most of the time we will be putting this phrase together. So most search tools allow phrase searching techniques. And if you are going to put a phrase, you might need to separate them with some Boolean words, Boolean operators, if you want to get results that are specific. Okay, and if the phrase is a phrase, so you may need to separate them with and at a point or in another point. And like we said, the database search engine will first of all pick out the one you separated as and before it starts picking out the one that you're separating with the or and the not. So if you take a look at this example, we will see that ethics, cloning, and reproductive techniques. So if we input this on a search engine, the and here will be looked at first. That is ethics and will be looked at first before we start looking at the search engine, we start looking at this or. So cloning, reproductive techniques associated with cloning. If you bring out any document that has reproductive techniques associated with cloning. So it will bring it, we are now looking for ethics and cloning or ethics and reproductive techniques. So we'll bring out any paper that deals with ethics first, that is associated with either cloning or associated with reproductive techniques. Now, this is a bit different from the second example, which is ethics or moral. Both of them are parentheses, and bioengineering or cloning. So it's going to bring out, let's forget about the star that is here first. Let's look at the or. It's going to bring out any information that deals with ethics, any information that deals with moral. That means ethics or moral combined with bioengineering or cloning. So we bring out these papers. But remember what we said is that the and is the primary thing it will deal with first. The second aspect of what I want us to take note of here when we are making this, looking for the information that we are making a search on, is that this star that is here is part of truncation. And truncation deals with, you cannot write, if you are making a search and you're looking for a particular information, you will not be writing ethics, ethical, ethic, and all that. So if you truncate it, the system will bring any document that deals with ethic, that deals with ethics, and deals with ethical. And it will equally bring out any document that deals with moral and deal with morals. Because researchers, some may use the term moral, others will use the term morals. So it will bring those out. So we need to know very well how to use Boolean operators, because the Boolean operators really, really are very helpful. If we don't want to get information that we don't need, we must be looking for. So I talked a little bit about that truncation. So truncation, otherwise called stemming, is a technique that broadens your search to include various words outside the end, word endings and spellings. So if a word like we said here, am I echoing?
Yes, you are echoing. Somebody's device. Somebody has two devices in the same place. They should disconnect one.
Okay. Okay, maybe let's
It's clear now.
Okay, fine. All right, thank you. So this is quite important. So let's look at truncation. Okay, this example we said ethics. If we truncate by putting this star, anything ethics will come out. Anything ethical will come out. Anything ethic will come out. Okay, so that's truncation. So truncation helps to broaden your search, right? But it makes it to be a little bit more specific as to what you want to achieve. So to use truncation, enter the root of a word and put the truncation symbol at the end. We've talked about the truncation symbol, which is that star. The database will return results that includes anything ending with that root word. So example is child. So if we put the star in front of the child is the root word, and then we put the star in front of it. It will bring out documents that deal with child, that is written as child, child's, children, children's, or childhood. And let's not forget that, yes, it may sound a little bit awkward, but everything is not written in, all papers, manuscripts are not written in English language. Some are written outside English. So when they are translated into English, some of these things may come up. And so you will really want to comb everything as much as possible and look into it. So this truncation is very critical when you are making your search. So the same thing with genetics, genetically, all that will come out. So truncation, the symbols are varied, but the most common ones are these ones we listed. The most common one that is used is this star, the first one. That will give us the answer. And it's put after the root word, unlike the white cat. We need to know the difference between where to put the truncation mark and where to put the white cat. So for white cats, they also substitute a symbol for one word as you make a search, just like truncation. It is useful if a word is spelled in a different way, but still has the same meaning. For example, we talk of woman and women, singular and plural. So white cats, you will put the white cat in between where you think differences will come up in spelling. And that will bring out documents that have woman and woman. So for this example, we have WOM, and we know that it's either singular after that or plural after that. So we put the white cat in between so that the database will search and return the document for us that has both women and women. The same thing with color. We know that it is either spelled as LOR or LOUR, as in color, there is a difference. So you put the white cat there so that I can retrieve the information. The same thing with organization, the American spelling, British spelling. Some papers are published in American English, others are published in British English. So when you are making a search, you are not going to type organization as in S and then type organization as in Z. Rather, you will use a white cat to try to achieve the same results. So nesting is used to group synonyms, spelling variations, or other alternative terms. And nesting search terms and the appropriate Boolean operators within brackets is a very good way of controlling logic of search terms, of making a search. So let's forget about the mathematical equation I put here as this thing. So if parentheses are used, then parts of the search that we are making that is contained within the parentheses, they will first be performed by the search engine. So if we take a look at the example here, and I wrote, for example, ethics and gamble or bet. So this will return different results from if you just wrote ethics and gamble or bet. Because as long as you put them without the parentheses, the search engine will look at it and bring out a different result from if you put the thing in parentheses. So in the first example here, which is ethics and parentheses gamble or bet, it will bring out ethics and gamble, or ethics and bets, unlike this one that is left open. So without the brackets, the operators are performed in an illogical order. So the search will return irrelevant results. So let's take note of this because this is very important. So subject headings describe the content of each item in a database. And we need to use, like we had said so before, that we need to use our subject headings to find relevant items on the same topic. So searching by subject headings or descriptors, as they are called, if we look at PubMed on a web page on PubMed, we are going to see the term descriptors, and they actually stand for subject heading. That's the most precise way of making a search on search articles on databases. It is better than keywords, like we said before. Then fields. Records that is using fields to search. Using fields to search. Records in library databases are comprised of fields containing specific pieces of information. And so we can decide and tell ourselves that, yes, we want to search on a particular field, or search a particular title, search a particular subject, or just search abstracts. All right, so the use of fields is one way to make a search when we are looking for information. So how database fields improve our search on the internet or search for information. To find various fields within a database, all we need is to look at the field where we are typing the thing, like we are typing on Google. And there may be drop-down menu either on the left-hand side or the right-hand side with boxes or menus. We'll look at the next example as C. Then we will select the field that we want, and then it will give us a more refined information. Then we can now combine the words and the fields together with the Boolean operators that we talked about, depending on how we want our information to come out. Either we put the and or we put the or, and then put them in parentheses to give us more specific results. So the common fields that are used in search engines are the author. The search engines used in databases are the author, the title, the journal title, abstract, publisher, date and year of publication, and subject and descriptor. So if we know any of these ones of a particular journal that we are looking for, we can actually use these ones to search. Okay. So how database fields improve our search? They limit your search to specific database fields, okay, that can yield more precise results that we have talked before. So example, if you are looking for books by Admin Smith, for example, instead of about him, it is more efficient to limit your search to the author. Since you already know the name of the author, it is better to just limit the name and write Adam Smith rather than writing Adam Smith on an open search field. So if we take a look at this one, we will see this is from one of the search engines databases. If we take a look at what we are seeing here, we see that we are looking at the author here. We want to search specifically for Johnson Norman. And all articles written by Johnson Norman will be brought out by the time we make that search. Okay. So that's what we are saying, that we can decide to map. We can decide and be more specific with our search. Remember that if you look to the left, it says we are looking at gen science apps and we are searching for genetic mapping, okay? And Johnson-Norman. There's another and here, but this field is left empty. That means what we are looking for is Johnson-Norman and its work on genetic mapping. And we will come here and specifically look for the author, and the author is Johnson-Norman. Here is the subject phrase in front of genetic mapping, is the subject phrase, while in front of the name is the author specifically. If we had something else placed on the third row, we will say you should also send for that one. Remember, the Boolean word here is and, not and not or. Okay, so it will bring out all documents, all articles that have genetic mapping and Johnson-Norman. The same thing here. This was brought out from PubMed sometime. If we look at this, the record below shows the field names on the left-hand side. So we have said that the title, we can search by title. We can search, all these ones are the fields: language, abstract, and descriptor. We talked about descriptor before. Okay, so the author, the title, the source, the standard number, the details, language, the abstract, and the descriptor. So the point that we need to make in looking for the information is actually to remember our Boolean operators. It's very, very crucial. If we forget Boolean operators, our information will not be too accurate as to what we are deserving to get. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akon. Yes, Dr. Rosuru, over to you.
Thank you. I have a notebook here, and I'm really taking down. Any question? Hello, any question? Let's remember the Telegram page. Click on it so that you'll be added. And any more questions, we'll tackle with it there. It's been nice. We've had a nice time.
Page, please. Hello?
Go to the chat box. You will see the Telegram link. Click on it.
Okay.
Yes. Have you seen it? Have you seen it?
I'm sending it now. I'm sending it again.
Okay. So just click on it, and then we'll continue from there.
Okay. I can see that Dr. Akon is very eager to give the last presentation, but before he does that, may I ask, these databases, how do we get them? We've talked about so many databases. See now.
Okay.
And all these Google Scholar. Google Scholar is the only one I know is free. Every other one you have to pay for. So please enlighten us.
Okay. Well, really, not every one or every other one of them. PubMed registration is free, and we can gain access to every document that's on PubMed. The only challenge with PubMed now, PubMed has recently changed their registration technique. Initially, you could just log on to PubMed, and then you do your registration and subsequently begin to browse. But now they have tied it to a third party. This is quite recent, implying that for you to register with PubMed, it's free, quite all right. But for you to register, you have to go through a third party. Either you go through the Facebook, your Facebook account, or you go through Google, or you go through Ncbi. Okay, one of those. And so I will encourage all of us to register with PubMed by tomorrow. we'll be able to look at how to search PubMed and how to, it's something that gave some tough time to people, several people. In fact, when you log on to PubMed, you find it a bit difficult if you don't know how to search PubMed. Then Hinari too is not free, but you pay for it. I will share with us the, fortunately we have access to Hinari. And so the access was given to me for training people in Africa to advance knowledge in Africa.
Oh,
so I will share the password.
That includes all of us who are participants today. We're all in Africa.
Yes, it includes all of us. So I will share the username and you're welcome. I will share the username and password with us so that we can access it. And then I'll let us know how we can link PubMed with Hinari, so that I will teach us how to search Hinari on its own, and also teach us how to search PubMed.
Sorry, let me check what
like I'm echoing again.
No, somebody is interrupting. I'm muting the person. All right, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I will also show us how to link PubMed with Hinari, so that if you search PubMed, you might not need to go back to Hinari to go and search. Whatever you search in PubMed, it will automatically bring out Hinari search for you. So it will give you information on how much how many articles you have on PubMed and how many articles you have on Hinari. Then direct open access journal, that one is there, or AJOL, that one is free. But okay, Cochrane is
free. Cochrane is free.
Is also free. We can, yes, it's free. We can register with Cochrane and get the information that we need. Web on Science is something that we can also log into and get some info. But Sinal you have to pay for. In fact,
and Medline, you have to pay for Medline as well.
Yes, you have to pay for Medline, but Medline, you can get some information on Medline via Ncbi. So we will be able to do that.
Is Ncbi free?
Yes, Ncbi is free.
Okay, but
Ncbi is free. Just that you have to have a third party.
When you were listing the databases, you didn't include PsycInfo and Embase.
Okay, that's true. I didn't.
There are two common databases.
There are several.
Exactly. But what
I will share them on the Telegram page.
Yes. What I am worried about now is if you want to do your systematic review and you want to get your article in Lancet, these free databases, would they be sufficient enough to ensure that your methodology was rigorous enough to meet that Lancet or New England Journal of Medicine or British Medical Journal standard for systematic review?
Yes, it is. It is. You are able to. However, we can link up with librarians both within and outside the country.
Which library do we have inside this country? Which library do we have inside this country, Dr. Akmo?
that has any of those things. The challenge, no, the challenge is this: such libraries, librarians may be able to make such, like UCH or LUTH. The libraries in those areas may be able to subscribe. For us here, I'm sure you have contacted
I don't think so.
No, for us here.
Yes, Del Sud. You mentioned Del Sud, and I made inquiry. Why I'm saying that is that I have called some of my colleagues in these institutions you are mentioning, and the response they give to me is that they will find out. When they tell me they will find out, automatically I just assume it's not available. But if it was available, they would have known.
It's not there.
So what we are saying is that is another area of internal advocacy we need for our institutions, both the teaching hospitals as well as the universities, they have to invest in these databases. They have to subscribe. And that is another problem why we are not doing it, because who wants to pay 3 million to subscribe for a year to have all these databases? Which individual? But an institution can do it.
You're right. You're right. I agree with you. Because if institutions don't subscribe, even persons in those institutions will not have access to any of those journals. So I agree with you that institutions need to subscribe.
So what most
hospitals.
of us in developing countries do now, I haven't done it, but I know of people who have done it, is that they link up with people who are in institutions abroad. So when they now want to do their systematic reviews, the ones in the developing countries, they will use all these free databases. Then the ones that are not free, they will now ask their colleagues in UK and US, where every institution has subscription and you have free access 24 hours
Subscribe, yes,
to all these databases. So that is the trick we do. But I think we need to go further, because that is not, it's not good enough for those of us who need to do, are interested in research and academics. Thank you so much, sir. We can go to the next lecture so that we round up.
Okay, I very much agree with you on that. So fallout of this is to see how we can improve on advocacy to institutions. Okay, thank you very much. So in documenting the evidence that is before us, once we have been able to we've been able to formulate our question, and we have made a search based on our criteria, inclusion and exclusion criteria, we need to do some documentation. And to document, we need to, first of all, begin by writing a protocol that will be assessed and approved before we begin the process of systematic review. So I would like to just mention something about writing the protocol. The protocol is going to involve majority of the things we have already talked about. But it is important that we talk about it. So the review protocol sets out generally the methods that are to be used. And these must be included because reviewers of the protocol will be looking out for them. So the protocol will set out the methods to be used in the review, including the review question, the inclusion criteria, the search strategy, study selection, data extraction, quality assessment, data synthesis, and plans for dissemination of the information upon completion of the review. Okay. But there are some key areas that the protocol must address, and that is the background to the systematic review. It must talk about the review question and the inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. My colleague had talked about this formulating the question before. So talking about the background, this section should explain really why the review is being carried out. It should also provide the rationale for the inclusion criteria and the focus of the question that we want to answer. That should be mentioned in the background. Then the review question and the inclusion criteria, if we look at that section is any systematic review really should set clear questions from the beginning. We have said so before, which will provide answers to policymakers to enable them to give us policy guidelines. The questions must be clearly stated, and the questions can be extremely specific or quite broad, but specific ones are preferable. So broad questions, if broad, can be broken down. into more specific objectives as much as possible. So the easiest way to do that is to use the term, the review question. If we use the term review question, it will tend to narrow our question that we want to answer, rather than making it as broad as possible. So the review question can be framed, of course, we have talked about that one, so no need to repeat that. These components of the review question, together with the study design, will then be refined, and then they must all be included. Okay, so if we use this retinoblastoma as an example, what is the best treatment option for retinoblastoma? That's a simple review question. And then we can now look at it, which my colleague has talked about, so I won't waste time on this. But these have to be included in the protocol that will be submitted, registered and submitted. So the population, intervention methods, and then comparators, outcomes. So let's not waste much time on that, because we have discussed them before. The study design, we don't need to waste much time on that. But I just want to note here that we need to do some search, to look at previous study designs and look at randomized control trials where we are trying to put this. So how we want to carry out the systematic review must be well documented step by step, so that it can be reproducible by someone else who wants to come on board some years later, or who want to repeat that or add more information to what we are doing. The same thing with the inclusion criteria. We had also discussed this before, so I will talk much about this. And we talked about the hierarchy of study designs. So as part of the protocol, we need to include which of the interventions we are going to study. Of course, we know we'll be working more with randomized control trials, but we know it's not every case of randomized control trial you can get to enable you do a systematic review. For example, there is no way you are going to do a randomized control trial for somebody if you want to test the effect of smoking. You cannot now force people that group A, you must start smoking, and group B, no smoking. No, you will not be able to force people like that. So we may be looking at other options of, say, quasi-experimental, even though they have their own biases. But we may be looking at things like that as papers to include in the systematic review. But even at that, everything must be documented. So they see, depending on your research question. So the reviewers who are going to review your protocol will know that, yes, there is limitation. It's also important that having gotten your research question, you want to do a preliminary search, like we said, whether you have enough randomized control trials in circulation to answer that question. And if you don't have, then the few that there are available, are they enough to answer the question? And that brings to mind, what is the minimum that is required to answer a systematic review question? Some have said 9, some have said 2, some have said 3, that even 9 is too much. It depends on the availability of data on that topic. If the data is available, fine and good, then you can find ways of eliminating. But if the data is not available, then you work with the little that you have. Now, exclusion criteria. There are some things that, like language, I think we mentioned that before, that you can use to include or exclude. But you are ideally, for most systematic reviews, you want to include all that is available. And there is some bias in the sense that good articles tend to be published in English, and poor ones may not necessarily be published in English, or those that are significant may be published, and those that are not significant, not published. So a language barrier is an indication that may use to say, okay, is an exclusion criteria, or you're only going to attend to papers that are written in English and all that. Then the publication type. Studies are not always published as full papers in peer-reviewed journals. They may be published as reports and all that, and books and conferences. So we need to search, or theses. Some theses are not even published. So we need to search for all those. And you will need to indicate them in the protocol. And how you want to go about reviewing and overcoming publication bias. All those we will need to include in the protocol. Identifying research evidence. So we have discussed this before. We will need to include all this in our research protocol. So selection, the method of selection of the study, we also need to include that in the protocol. So like I said here, that the protocol should specify the process by which the decision in the selection of studies will be made, including the number of researchers who will screen the titles, those who will screen the abstracts, and those who will screen the full papers, and the methods of resolving disagreements. All those ones must be put in the protocol so that they can be reproducible by another group of researchers. The method of data extraction, the protocol should outline that also. The software that is being used, if you need to use the software, you will need to also indicate that and state the procedure that you will use to extract your data. And you want to specify whether the authors of primary studies will be contacted to provide missing or additional data. It will take time to get them. And in your documentation process, you will inform whether you contacted them and who responded, who did not respond, and why you eliminated such data. If you did, you are going to put that in documentation. So in the protocol, all that will be included. And if foreign language papers are to be included, you have to specify your translation arrangements in the protocol. How you assess quality too will also have to be included in the protocol from the very beginning, because everything involves transparency. So I have just said here too that the protocol should provide details of the method by which the appraisal will be done, including examples of specific quality criteria that you want to use, and specify the details of how you are going to appraise each paper, each of those manuscripts, and the process of, conducting the appraisal, that one too, how your disagreements will be resolved. We've mentioned that. You will indicate all that. How are you going to synthesize the data? All that too will be included in the protocol, because you will state whether you are going to do a meta-analysis or you are not going to do a meta-analysis from the beginning. Even though we had said, if after doing the work, if you need to amend, you will need to write back how you are going to amend, assuming you are not going to do the data did not give you room to do meta-analysis. And so you will need some amendment. It is important that will be put forward from the very beginning, how it will be done. So outline how your heterogeneity will be explored between one manuscript and, one paper and the other, and how that will also be quantified. All that will be put in, not to give room for errors or bias. And where appropriate, you need to outline the approach you are going to use for your synthesis, narrative synthesis. Then you describe the planned subgroup or any sensitivity analysis that you intend to do. And investigation of publication bias. All that will be included. How you plan to disseminate after your systematic review is completed, how you plan to disseminate information to the population that your research question is focused at. It should be included in the protocol. So if we are to look at the summary, and every protocol, of course, sets out in advance the methods. The background must be included. The protocol should specify the review question, which we have talked about. And the protocol should specify the methods, which will be used to make all the search and identify the research, search the studies, extract data that you are going to include, assess the quality and synthesize results, and disseminate the same findings. Okay. Now, you have written a protocol and the protocol has come out successful. And then you now want to continue your search and select your data. There are different stages. So from the beginning, you make up a decision that will be made based on the titles. So you make a search, you go to PubMed, for example, and you search for your topic. Whatever topic you get, whatever number you get, you have to record it. Assuming you made a search and you get 850 articles on that topic, you will record it. And then you will download the topic and the title and the abstract and put it either on an online software or you put it on an Excel sheet. And then you will screen based on that and eliminate the number you want to eliminate. And then transform that into your, transfer that into your management software, which can either be Mendeley or you want to continue using your online software. Then you will now, after that, I'm just letting us know the process. After that, you can now begin to look at the full articles to see which one you are going to include and which one you will exclude. So the first decision to make is to screen the titles after you have made your search. And where it is possible, you will also screen the abstract to see which articles to include and which one not to include. The second stage, for studies that appear to meet your inclusion criteria, or in cases where when a definite decision cannot be made, based on the article alone, the article title, and the abstract alone, then the full paper will be looked for so that you can read through the full paper to see whether to include it or not to include it. Then we run a pilot study on the articles, maybe take about 7 articles or 8 articles. And then we run a process. We had mentioned this before to see if our tools are appropriate and if they flow sequentially. It's not when we finish at the end of 9 months, you now discover that, oh, if you had known, you would have used this tool rather than use that tool. So we'll do a pilot process. And any change that needs to be made will be made from the beginning. Then masking and blinding. So it's something that we need to look critically at as we are reviewing the documents that we want to include. Judgments about inclusion may be affected adversely by the knowledge of the authorship, the institution, the journal titles, and the year of publication, or the results and inclusion of articles. So if 2 people or 3 people, for example, are reviewing titles and reviewing abstract, and they discover that, oh, this journal is from Lagos, and I know this author, the tendency is to say, okay, let's include it. Or I know this author is from, or this institution, I know the institution, the tendency is, okay, let's include it. That creates a bias, even though that article may not have been included ordinarily because of other criteria. So it creates a barrier. So the idea is, okay, is it possible to blind the author and blind the institution? If that is done, then that's fine. But studies have also found that it's not really as helpful. But that if two people can do the search, and two people can look at the article title and include or exclude at independent times and then present their results together, it's more helpful than blinding authors and institutions. So in general, on Mark's assessment of two independents, okay, it's acceptable. Now, so how do we deal with lack of information? Sometimes the amount of information reported about a study is not sufficient to make a decision about whether to include that article or not to include the article, because now we are looking at specific articles to include or not to include. If the information supplied by the authors is not adequate, then you are at a crossroad. In that case, it can be helpful to contact the authors and ask for more details. Okay, it takes time, but that is what needs to do. But if it requires time, of course, and resources to do that, then the authors may just decide and say, okay, they will exclude this. Okay, especially if that article is old. If it's not a recent article, they may decide, or the authors didn't even reply, you contacted them and then they didn't reply. You can decide to exclude it, and you give your reasons in your flow chart why those articles were not included. So, so how do we deal with duplication? Because we had said earlier that an article may be published in more than one journal. So we can use the software to remove the duplicates. So you look for duplicates and you take them out. Because if you include more than one article, the same article gives a risk of bias. So our decisions, documenting the decision
Are you having problems? Any network issues? We can't hear you anymore, sir. And you're not muted. I think he's jumped out. Oh dear. Oh dear, dear, dear. I hope he comes back. It's been a very rewarding time. I hope even while we are watching and listening, we are getting up. I have gotten up to 5 times to recharge my phone or recharge my power bank so that the devices continue to function. It's really a marathon CME, but it's one that it's very needful. And like I was saying earlier, that for policymakers, we desperately need the evidence for the policies. And in my ministry, definitely we are going to be seeking those who can enable us carry out some forms of reviews. They may not be as rigorous as the standard systematic review, but even if it's just a desk review of policy documents, our gray literature, or an overview of environmental issues that we are faced with right now. These are some things that we're going to be looking at. And so those who are really interested should let me know, private chat me or send me a mail expressing interest. And we also need to know that you have done it before in some form. So you may have to put in your publications to say that, oh, this publication involved a rigorous review. The standard literature review is different from the systematic review. I'm sure he has been very modest with his slides, and I'm sure he has a slide where you compare the systematic review with the standard literature review. And you find out that the literature review tends to be biased. You look for literature to buttress your hypothesis. But the systematic review, just as he has explained, whether it is your friend's research or your own research, if it does not meet the inclusion criteria, it does not get included in the review. And so you may actually start off with about 200 or 300 articles that you have found in your databases. And then by the time you start your selection based on your inclusion and exclusion criteria, you may end up with just about 20 articles, which you now have to rigorously review and give reasons why you are selecting. These were the ones of high quality. What were the criteria you used to determine that they were of high quality when you're doing your quality assessment? And that said, it's important that you have that at the back of your mind. And the beauty of the systematic review is that because of the databases, the connectivity, the global village, the digitization that we have embarked upon, globalization, if you do a systematic review that is rigorous in Nigeria and you duplicate the protocol in New Zealand, you are going to get similar results. And that is the beauty of the systematic review. So it is not biased because it is very straightforward with laid down structures which you must actually imbibe and follow. So I don't know, Dr. Akpo, are you back? Can I make you a host again so that you finish sharing your slides? Emmanuel.
Okay, thank you, ma. Yes.
Oh, you're okay. Yes.
I'm sorry, I
back.
don't know what happened.
Okay. No. You must have tripped. You must have tripped. Yes.
Yes.
So
probably.
yes. So when the network trips you, it throws you out, and then until you come back. So please, I was just talking about the fact that even in our ministry, we're going to be looking for experts who are skilled in some form of reviews to help us do some desk review and overviews and general reviews of environmental issues to guide our policies. So it's all good. Thank you so much. You're welcome back.
Thank you, ma. So I'm sorry, I apologize for being off the network. So in reporting the studies, because as part of the documentation, we are going to have to report. So we need to follow a flow chart that shows the number of studies that were originally shared and from which sources that those studies were searched. And one useful way, of course, is documenting the study selection process. And the recommendation for reporting and presentation of a flow chart when reporting systematic reviews with or without meta-analysis, of course, have been developed by the Prisma group. Okay. So to minimize bias, the studies should be assessed for inclusion, which we have talked about before, and exclusion criteria. And then, so independent assessment, disagreements must be resolved, and how they will be resolved will be documented. Now, there is something called near misses, and we need to, I think we all need to know about near misses. There are articles that you will want to say, okay, were it not for this, we would have included it. Such articles are called near misses, but you cannot include them because of either that bias in one of the areas or the risk of bias is high. You will not include it. So such articles are articles that are called near misses. So there are two areas that we need to look at. You download and store the information, like we have said, and then you use fields to store your key information. So when you are documenting, we will look at when and the dates that when you searched for the articles and which of the databases you actually searched, including the date, the month, and the year. Because this is essential. The review process does not finish, it's not finishing so quickly. Over the time that it will take, other articles will have come up. So you will document just before you wrap up your review. So where you search, the databases that you search, your trial registers or hand searches, your bibliography, literature, your gray literature searches, your Google Scholar, wherever you made your search from, you will document them properly using the Prisma chart. How you search the engines, you will also, so what you found, you will put it on the Prisma diagram, okay? And this is how it looks before now. So you talk about the number of identified, number of records that were identified. This was the former Prisma, but there has been a modification to this recently. And that modification just talks about whether you are doing a review for the first time or you are doing a review to a previous systematic review. So, but whatever it is, if you had any additional information that you source from any other source, you will add it. That gives you the total. Then you now remove your duplicates. When you remove duplicates, you will tell us the number that is left. And then the number that you screened from article, from the title, and from abstract. You will tell us those numbers that you excluded. And then when you now read the full review, you will tell us the number you excluded. And then now the number you finally have included for your quantitative analysis. If you are going to do those that are, after reading your full length articles, those that are now eligible, you mention it. If the figures are now, the data is now related, then you can proceed and do your analysis. Okay, so you will document it like this. And then, so this is the new one that is currently on the website of Prisma. It's a bit different from that one because they categorically stated this one should be used for new databases that are searched for both databases and registers, databases alone, or new research work, new systematic review, and then systematic review that were previous. Now, Prospero is a body of that deals with systematic reviews, prospective systematic reviews, and this forms the criteria of what must be included, which is what we talked about a little earlier in this presentation. So every criteria here will be well documented. We will put an example of it too on the Telegram page. And every one of us, we will give an assignment. Every one of us will go there and see how we can log into Prospero and see how we can register with Prospero if we are to move forward with systematic reviews. Okay, so this gives an example of previous work that has been done and how they were eliminated. So the initial search, of course, gave a total of 635. Additional records from identified sources gave 3. So at the end of the day, they trimmed everything down and they only analyzed 28 in this example. In this other example, they started with 975 and following exclusion criteria and following assessment of full articles, where the first screening, they removed 859. That's a huge number out of 975, just by looking at the title and looking at the abstract. Then they were left with 116. And then by looking at the full article, they gave reasons why they will exclude them. They were now left with 11. And then we got one additional reference from the reference section. Something that I forgot to mention is, as we screen the articles, we must also look at the reference section of each of the articles to see if we can get additional information of a manuscript, of a paper to look out for. So at the end of the day, out of 975, they were only able to screen, to work with 12. And those 12 articles will inform policy making, okay, because they are crucial. This is another one. This one started with 2000. They gave here now, you see that they gave the sources of where they got information from. On the left side, on this right side, they got the different databases where they got the total of everything from. And then at the end of the day, the only number that they worked with was 11. So this just tells us that it is important for us to do. It's a very rigorous work. To get from Embase alone, you are getting 2,324 articles, and you have to look through all those number of articles and then trim everything down to 11. It's a very rigorous exercise, but we are going to get there as a team, as we work together. So I think, so I should say that there are levels of screening, and basically 3 levels. The first is title. We screen the titles. We screen off documents using titles, like I said. Then we screen off documents using abstracts. Then we will now screen off documents using the full texts. Thank you very much.
Dr. Akpo, you have done more than justice to this topic. I was about to ask, is title, abstract, and text shifting obsolete? Because I was waiting to hear that. Then you now described it, and after describing it, that was the last slide you showed. So I was beginning to feel that maybe my own knowledge of systematic review is rusty, and all these things are now obsolete.
No,
so thank you. Thank you for reassuring
You're welcome.
me. All right.
You're welcome.
So the title, the abstracts, the title, abstract, and text is quite interesting, because there was a time I had these hard copies of the Transactions, Royal Society of Tropical Medicine. I've been a fellow of the Royal Society since 2002. And they were sending me the hard copies because that was what I subscribed for. But since then, I've been subscribing for the online copy, so I pay less subscription. And so I had cartons of them, and I didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, I had research questions. So I had all these officers in my office in the Ministry of Health. So I gave them different journals, and I asked them to do first title sifting, then they should do abstract sifting, and then they left the journal. So they were able to pick out the journals that had the articles that I was interested in. And based on that, I was able to do some research work and so on and all that. So it's quite interesting. That was doing it a manual form of title and abstract sifting. But most times, because we have access to the databases, we do these things online. And then again, the beauty of having studied or working in an institution where these databases are there, you see how much the institution, the society, and the government, they commit to research. Because when I was doing my master's in health services research in the University of Sheffield School of Health and Health-Related Research, SHA, what happened was that when we couldn't find the articles, because you need to get the full article, and I flashed back to 20 years earlier, I did this in 2010 and and 2001 or 1999 or so, when I was doing my proposal writing and so on. So about 10 years earlier, I found out that what we used to do, we go to the cyber cafe and they will give them search terms that we have a study on this topic, and they would have download, and all they could give us was abstracts. And we used to write our literature review based on abstracts. I don't know if anybody, yes, anyone, you know? So that was what we did then. I remember so many things we did. It was just the abstracts. So it was a shock for me to now go to the University of Sheffield and find out that nobody was looking at for abstract. They wanted you to go through the entire paper. And it was how? But those papers were there, all in PDF. Yeah. So you click download and you keep. Even Google Scholar, you can click download, even if it's not in PDF, but it's some form of maybe Hotmail and all that. You can copy, paste on Word and download. So you could have a folder with 500 full papers. And you wonder, what are you going to do with all those papers? So you now have to take them title by title. First, remove all the ones that don't sound like what you need. You reduce, and then after that, from your 500, you get to 100. You read all the abstracts one by one until you get to a sizable number, and then you start doing your quality assessment and so on. It was magical for some of us because we were so used to only abstracts that we were shocked to see full papers. Yeah. But then you now find a paper and you can't find it. It's not in the database. Do you know what used to happen? We go to the library and make a formal application, a formal request, and they will go to the British Library, and they will go to the British Library in London, make that request, and in a couple of days, your package of the full paper photocopy will be arriving in your letterbox. That was the level of commitment the society had towards research. So I just want to say that we are over 80. Do you know that we have 80 people on the Telegram platform that we just opened 3-4 hours ago? People are hungry for the right thing. The question is, between today that we have learned, both those of us who are learning for the first time or those of us like me who are refreshing our knowledge, and the next review, overview, literature review, systematic review we're going to do, there are going to be many mountains and there are going to be many valleys. The question is, how many of us will persevere till the end? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, let us have them. Dr. Rosiru, over to you. Dr. Rosiru, are you there? Or she's jumped out? Rapatua. She's there. Dr. Rosiru. Dr. Magdalene Rosiru.
She stepped out.
But she's there. Okay, maybe her device is there, but she has stepped out to drink some water. All right.
Yes.
So it appears, it appears that we've come to the end of a very exhilarating session. I want to say that no amount of honorarium is going to be enough to pay our facilitators for how much virtue. Okay, you're back. How much virtue has gone out of them? But some of us who are, I'm seeing some of my profs. I'm seeing Professor Issa from Ncbi UBTH. I'm seeing my profs here. Please, ma, we are asking you to talk to the institutions to make sure that they commit the resources to making sure that we have an enabling environment to do systematic reviews. And for some of us who are still in policy making, by the special grace of God, I still have 5 more years to retirement. I would be so happy if some of us here can join in groups and committees to help us do reviews on wherever it is. I can still do things in health, even though I'm in the environment. But right now, environment is a very, very serious matter that I am trying to be working on. So we need this information, we need the evidence to do the research. Many times as clinicians, we've relied so much on expert opinion. We say, oh, I've been an expert for 10 years, I've been as an expert in this field for 20 years, but it was so demoralizing and disillusioning when we were taught about the hierarchy of evidence, and we found out that expert opinion is at the bottom of the evidence. So no matter how many years you have been in practice and you have gotten the body of expert opinion, you have to carry out standard research, and the gold standard is clinical trials, after which you do systematic reviews of clinical trials, and then you now do your meta-analysis. You need to begin to do that to add to the body of your expert opinion. And the issue of clinical trials is not only the thing you do in the test tube. Like Dr. Awuno said, it may be a behavior change communication strategy. That could be the intervention. It's an experimental study. So it doesn't have to be a vaccine. It doesn't have to be a new drug. But it could just be a behavioral change intervention or a method of training, physical training versus a virtual training, which is better. And you do your experimental study comparing those two. You do your Pico, and you get your randomized control trial. You randomize your participants, give them the training, and then you monitor the outcome. So your participants, your intervention, your comparator, your outcome, you do that, and your study design, because if you wish, and you are good and home and dry, and you publish. And those are the kind of articles we want in the Journal of the Medical Women's Association of Nigeria. Dr. Rozuru, you're welcome back.
Hello.
Hi, Professor Isa.
Good evening. Congratulations.
Thank
I'm really
you, ma.
happy the way you are going, and I want to encourage you.
Thank you, ma.
For the rest of us who are participants, I want to also encourage all of us to get to the end of this, because we are all still learning. I've learned a lot this evening, and I want to encourage all of us to just keep on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma.
Regards and wishes.
Thank you, ma.
Yeah, Mike, please get back to me after now.
Yes, ma. My mom is here. Oh, yes, ma. I will, ma.
That's why I'm saying so. You have to confess your sins now.
I will see you in camera, ma.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's so good to reconnect. It's so good to reconnect. All right. So, Dr. Rozuru, can you wrap us up so that we can dismiss and prepare for tomorrow? Okay. Maybe she's having some connection issues. So I think we'll just call it a day.
Hello.
Okay, is she back? Yeah. Is somebody speaking? All right. So I want to thank everyone. I think we can call it a day. It's been rewarding. We need to rest and energize for tomorrow, where we have the final day. Thank you all for coming, and have a good night. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, ma'am. Bye, everybody.
Very much.
Bye.